seems like this secondary, after getting gashed against Notre Dame, Wake Forest, they've tightened it up too. They're focused. They're not blowing coverages. They're on their man. They're doing what they need to do.
Yeah, no, you're right, Mark. At the beginning of the season, it wasn't looking so pretty whatsoever. Guys were not on their man and getting beat. And, even with guys, Travis Jay had a rough start to the season, along with Brownlee and a few others, and, Jerry Jones. But it seems like something started to click, and we got to see that against North Carolina. We got to see a little bit of it at Syracuse, but also North Carolina. I mean, Sam Howell had to stay back there and keep searching for an open guy. And the best offense that North Carolina had was Sam Howell just running. And if you're able to do that, then Florida State's defense and Adam Fuller are going to be happy that you're just having him run around. And that allowed Jermaine Johnson, Keir Thomas, Gaynor, Sidney Williams to get all over Sam Howell. And right now, Florida State's Jarvis Brownlee had a pick six on Saturday. He could have had 2 pick sixes, and he laughed at himself and felt pretty disappointed that he didn't have 2. But he had a big time mistake there and made up for it. And it was an even harder play to make the play on the ball the second time, but he did it, and he brought it back home for 70-yard pick six on Saturday. And that's just a true testament to what Mike Norvell and Jarvis Brownlee, they have a pretty interesting relationship, and Norvell always speaks on him that some players need a little bit of extra love here and there. And Norvell laughed and said, and I'll give him the extra love if he needs it. And so that's just kind of how that relationship works. And like he said, there's a few other players that need that. And, but Jarvis mentioned after the game that he is very, very appreciative of Mike Norvell since Norvell arrived at FSU and believing in him, because we didn't really hear a lot about Brownlee until Mike Norvell arrived and allowed Brownlee to get into a lot of the rotation. And he's turned out to, he's a starting corner for Florida State and has played well the last couple of weeks. So Brownlee, along with Jerry Jones, Jamie Robinson Jamie also snags an interception in the red zone. Haven't seen that in a long while, but in the red zone there, Jamie locks down that and gets an interception. And then Sidney Williams, you got to hope that he's going to be fully healthy for this upcoming weekend. But overall, this defensive and the secondary is excelling, and you got a true freshman now on the defensive side with Kevin Knowles that is playing his heart out. He looks like a baby Asante Samuel Jr., different position, but he has that same kind of heart, that same kind of mentality coming in as a true freshman. That's exactly what Asante Samuel Jr. was, and he's wearing that same number 26. And so, that guy takes care of his body too. Seeing him at practice and, getting to interview him, he takes good care of his body. He's focused in on the game plan ahead, and that's what he has to do as a true freshman. But he has a big time opportunity this upcoming weekend playing against, still Clemson. This is still Clemson. I know the offense for up there in Death Valley isn't fantastic, but they've got playmakers. They have potential to make big plays. And, of course, Dabo Swinney, I don't think he's a big fan of Florida State. I don't think Mike Norvell and the staff really is either after his comments last year. And so I think this defense is going to want to bring it. But secondary wise, I think there's definitely, like you had mentioned, there's been a big time improvement there and much need. This is Florida State. This is supposed to be DBU. This is supposed to be lockdown. You're supposed to be on your man, not allowing those big plays. And Florida State has not done that in the last couple of weeks. And, they're going to want to have to keep that trend going this upcoming weekend.
The off season's so long, and we talk about the schedule for so many weeks that we've got this perception in our mind as to, okay, this is the way, these are the good teams, these are the bad teams, these are the games that are gimmies, these are the games that, and Clemson was that first one to check off the list and say, can't win that game.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a lead, they're a playoff team, can't win that one. Even for those people projecting Florida State, let's say, to go 8-4, not going to win that game. That's the first one they're not winning. And here we are, and they're still a 10-point underdog. Clemson still looks like a little bit better team, but it's winnable. Clemson's really struggling on offense. Their offensive line, and they've had, I just talked to a Clemson guy, 14 or 15 injuries, guys that are out for the season. They lost another starting offensive lineman and their starting tight end on Saturday against Pitt. DJ's a little bit lost. They lost Justin Ross, their best wide receiver. He's done. They are banged up and beat up. And like you say, you don't know exactly where their mindset might be, because they could be teed off, or they could be like, we don't play these kind of seasons. We're not used to this. So what are we playing for at this point? Because the ACC is not necessarily out of the question for them, but it's slipping away.
Yeah, no, it is slipping away. And I don't know, I was just thinking about this earlier when I was eating lunch, is just thinking about, before the season, nobody would have predicted Florida State to win this game this weekend. But isn't it crazy, the ups or the downs and now the ups, stock rising for Florida State? And, it hasn't been superior opponents. We understand that. But look at Syracuse. They're on a good run. But looking to it before the season, I would have never thought Florida State was going to be in contention to win this. But now, after an 0-4 start, now I feel like confident. Now I feel better than I did in the preseason. I'm like, what in the world is going on? It's just such a weird season. But I wonder how Clemson. I wonder how they're going to show up, because they could be ticked off, pissed off. Dabo Swinney could trigger. I mean, he could be triggered. But honestly, sometimes we've done it before, where Florida State, we've seen it, where they've just taken care of business against Clemson. And the best way of doing that is just pissing off Dabo and putting him in the tough situation and making him a little scared there on the sideline, and making him have hissy fits with Venables on the sideline, which is always fun to see. And I think Mike Norvell, like I had mentioned earlier, I don't think these two are going to be ones that get along very well. I think the comments after last season, Norvell and staff weren't fond of, after they were put in a really difficult spot with COVID-19 going on and protecting their players. And Dabo Swinney, as always, makes a few comments without thinking. And, and listening to Kenny Dillingham today, the reporter asked, what are your thoughts on, Dabo Swinney and his comments last year and head into this upcoming weekend to be able to face them for the first time. And Kenny Dillingham laughed and says he doesn't care. And there's a few other things that he said that I think are interesting to listen to. I take it in a certain way of Dillingham being very competitive, and some maybe don't think of it that way. But I do think Kenny Dillingham said a few things afterwards that were directed exactly towards Dabo. Just wasn't going to say it straight up, of course, just doing some light coach speak. But this team, that just shows how competitive the staff is, and that's only going to, go down into this team. And I'm very excited to be there tomorrow morning to see how they show up to practice, because they showed up great. They had their best practice on Tuesday last week, and that's UMass. I mean, I'd take that for a big thing there, because they could have done that. They could have just been like, blah, whatever. And after a bye week too. And Norvell said they had the best practice on Tuesday, and then had a really good up and down, but a good practice on Wednesday. I'm interested to see how they show up tomorrow. You can have all the energy in the world, and they're obviously going to be hyped and ready to rock. I have no concern about that, but I'm wondering, are guys going to be any mistakes? Are they going to be kind of out of their head a little bit? Or are they going to be dialed in like they've been the last couple of weeks? And it's hard to predict that, because this is such a young team, guys that haven't had a lot of experience, maybe, even definitely second team. You look at the defensive line for Florida State, and there's some guys that have had to jump in, like Joshua Farmer, who hasn't had any college experience, only for this season. That's a true freshman coming in. Malcolm Ray jumps in at defensive line too, and has played great. It's going to be a fun week. That's just, Mike Norvell said it too. He said it's going to be a very fun week in preparation for this game. And Kenny Dillingham and Mike Norvell, I thought, called one of their best games, if not their best game, against North Carolina and Sam Howell 3 weekends ago. And I just have some certain feeling that they've got something. They're going to have something interesting on Saturday, and that's just kind of how the demeanor I got out of Norvell and the rest of the staff this morning during press conferences.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to sell this game like it's 2013, 14, 15, 16 in that range, but
yeah,
because they're not 7-0, 7-0, or 7-0, 6-1, but still, this game has more juice than a Clemson Florida State game since probably 2017.
Yeah, no, it has that kind of energy. It feels like it has that. I don't know. I feel like both teams are kind of ticked off. Like I had mentioned earlier, Dabo's comments last year, and I'm sure that's going to be talked about in the locker room this week. And then along with Clemson, them being in a place they haven't been in so damn long. I mean, it's so weird to think of Clemson being unranked rather than, also being 4-3 on the season. that's just something they're not used to. But this team, this Florida State team, is just believing in each other, and they're loving one another. And we talked about that too the last couple of years. And James Coleman, former Knoll fullback on here, has talked about it plenty of times. This team, the locker room, I don't think was really, there's a lot of big egos, a lot about all about me kind of mentality, but these guys are loving, they love splitting carries. The running back room loves splitting carries. The quarterback room loves each other. They're hanging out after games during the week. And then defensively, I mean, that DB room is getting better and better. And, it's just the transfers. I mean, we got to mention too, the transfers coming in. We got to spend a lot of time this offseason talking about them individually once they made their commitments to Florida State. But man, Mike Norvell and the staff know how to evaluate talent, but also evaluate people, players, maturity. And Jermaine Johnson has been an incredible fit for Florida State in that locker room. He talked about it on the Pack and Durham show on the ACC network this morning, saying, I came in and I could have had a big time ego and just thought about myself and future, but I came in, being on the same level as everybody else and just wanted to play for my teammates and get better. And it wasn't the best start that we wanted at all, but now we're starting to see growth. And, that goes along with Jamie, who's getting better and better too, and getting that defense on, because he got put into a quick position right away. I mean, he was a starting safety for Florida State coming in. And, that's not an easy spot that he was put into, around that nickel area. And he had to learn that defense, and I think he's still learning it too. But I mean, that's a transfer that will be here next year too. But I mean, Jared Jackson also coming in, didn't really think about him this upcoming season, but boom, he jumps in and has been a leader. I mean, calling out Sidney Williams. We don't want any mistakes being had. I know I'm going on a rant, but it's a very positive rant about this the transfer portal for Florida State and them excelling in that. Dylan Gibbons, I mean, the list kind of goes on and on.